Let's bring in Doug Schoen, former advisor to President Bill Clinton and a Fox News contributor. Evan Siegfried, Republican strategist and author of GOP GPS. I said earlier that this is going to be like a big Fox Report interview with two friends, but you might not act like friends by the time it's over. So let's just get the niceties going, shall we? Let's see how long that lasts. I want to talk a little bit about what needs to happen in this next week with the staff. Your thoughts?
Well, the president has a huge communications problem, and it's the Republican Party as well that have not been firing on all cylinders. We've lost the message battle to Democrats. When we go out and can't get our message through that we are achieving results for the American people, and Democrats are getting the message through that we are not, that's a problem. So what we need to do is have not only the White House have President Trump go out and say what his goals are and how it helps the American people and tell the stories of the American people.
But you have a communications department. You have a White House press secretary. Are those the areas that you think need to change? And, you know, is the bigger issue here the leakers?
Well, I think we have to actually change who's on camera for briefings, certainly, and I'm sure Doug will agree with me on that.
I don't know a Democrat who will go ahead.
Well, look, this is a much more serious problem than my good friend Evan suggests. We've got serious legal problems with the issues relating to the Russian investigation. The report Friday night that Jared Kushner was setting up his own potential back channel.
You saw the Homeland Security Secretary has no problem with that, because that's a country we need to be talking to.
The FBI might have another view. We also have the ongoing issues relating to General Flynn, to Paul Manafort. So there's that bucket, Harris, but also there's the substance. And I think Evan would understand that when you're trimming almost $1 trillion from Medicare, 23 million people potentially in 10 years being cut out of health care, when food stamps are going to be eviscerated, when Social Security
So what you're talking about...
We're talking about a substance problem.
What you're talking about are some of the things that were found in a CBO score last week, and what some are looking at and being critical about a bill that yet has to go through the Senate and then back to the House.
It's never going to get through the Senate.
You can't be looking at tea leaves there. You're kind of...
I'm looking at what's been publicly reported.
Doug is proving my point on the messaging more by saying it's a complete disaster. The president and Republicans need to go on offense and say, no, we're doing it because of this, and they need to show Americans who have been hurt.
Let me ask you a question. So he's been out of the country for 9 days. This was an opportunity for people in your party to step up and take over some of that messaging. Why didn't it happen? Don't Republicans have this president's back or not?
Republicans have their own backs at the end of the day because they're politicians. And what they're looking at right now, they have not had any sort of legislative accomplishment that has come out that they can go back to their districts for 2018 and say, vote for me because I did something.
Well, if what you say is true, that they have their own backs before this president, what is the midterm election season going to look like for Republicans, Doug?
Very, very bad. Even with the two special elections we've held where, yes, Evan, Republicans did win, but much closer than it had been previously, that's looking at potentially 35 to 50 or more seats that the Democrats will pick up if that margin translates.
All right, so that's a long ways away. And what Evan is saying is that the president now can kind of control the message by changing the messengers, if you will. Anybody else you'd look at outside the communications department?
Well, I would look at actually achieving results through tax reform and the AHCA.
Wall Street seems to be poised. They anticipate this. Have you seen Wall Street and how hot it is?
Wall Street absolutely is anticipating it. And what we're going to need is to have the winds at our backs as Republicans because of the Democratic momentum for the midterms. And if we get tax reform in now,
but it's not going to happen.
But if we get it in now, what would happen is the economy would be firing on all cylinders just before the midterms.
But you can't basically cut taxes for the wealthiest and expect
to get taxes for all Americans.
You can't cut taxes for the wealthiest, which is what the Trump plan does, and expect to get any Democratic votes.
What about the corporate tax? That should be an area where everybody agrees.
It is, but they haven't taken it out, put it aside, as Evan and I agreed a couple of weeks ago, and done that first. That would have been a very good initiative, Harris. I think you're right, and I think Evan would agree.
All right. I want to move on somewhat here and talk a little bit about Mr. Trump. He has his own attorney now. I know you know that
I know Mark has one. It's a very good lawyer,
Russia investigation. No evidence of any collusion. My goodness, I feel like I want to learn how to say that in several different languages now, because we hear it coming out of Democrats on the Hill too. So they're looking, but there's no evidence. Let me just say it again.
But we got plenty of time and plenty of issues and plenty of people to investigate before we reach a conclusion.
Are you as concerned about the leakers, though? Because that actually puts our national security
Of course
at risk
I am.
immediately.
Of course I am. But I'm also concerned about the back channels to the Russians, about what General Flynn did with the Turks, Paul Manafort's ties with the Russians. I'm worried about all of that.
Can I say something about the back channel, though? If it is in fact true that Jared Kushner would reach out to do something like that, and the Homeland Security Secretary said he had no problem with it, but if it's true, wouldn't that signify that there was not collusion? Why would you need a back channel with the Kremlin if in fact you already had several established? It's just a question. I know neither of you can answer it. We'll move on. Have you heard what Angela Merkel of Germany has just said? That in the past few days, Europe should not be able to count on others. She's alluding to and implying she's talking about Brexit, perhaps President Trump. What's going on? And what, by the way, is Europe going to do without us?
Well, I actually come down, and I think that what is happening now with what Merkel has said is music to the ears of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has been longing to drive a wedge between the United States and Europe for decades. And what we can do now is reaffirm our commitment to Europe by President Trump going out and saying, if your house is ever on fire because you're my friend, I will come and I will help you. And that would be a way we can.
And Evan is 100% right. What Donald Trump missed was to reaffirm the importance of Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which says an attack on one nation is an attack on us all. And Evan, you couldn't have been more correct. Vladimir Putin was the big winner of the NATO summit.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to talk about Article 5. I thought it was critically important that it looked like a little statuesque response when the president was speaking at NATO headquarters in Brussels this week when he said, you know, the 23 out of 28 who aren't paying their fair share, it's time for that to happen. Would you, Evan, as a Republican, want him to agree to Article 5 before being able to deliver on that important message that ginned up your base?
Yes, because the one time Article 5 was invoked was after 9/11, and we went into Afghanistan to get al-Qaeda.
And you don't think he'd step up?
I hope he would, but we have to remember.
He wants to get ISIS, it would seem, more than anybody.
I would love to get ISIS, and I think he's right to, and I think most of NATO wants to. But we have to remember there was actually momentum behind the scenes to get more payments, especially on Germany's part. But President Trump is so unpopular in Germany. When he did it publicly, it forced Angela Merkel to pull back and actually oppose him in public.
All right, so they had women, thousands of them in Cologne, who had to buy more pepper spray than they could bring into the country after assault situations, and they were pointing to some of those in the community who might be on a terrorist watch list or might fall into that kind of area. It's hard to believe that Merkel would be more upset with our president than she is with the terrorists in her country.
Well,
Go ahead,
look,
Doug.
I can tell you that she has been steadfast in working to eliminate, to the extent possible, terror in Germany. But we have longstanding alliances with the Germans and the French, and Article 5 is at the core of our defense, more important than any single treaty or agreement we have. And unless that's reaffirmed, the division of the United States and Europe continues. And as Evan said, Vladimir Putin sees a divided America as he sees with the investigation. He's the big winner of everything that has gone on.
Wow, you sure do give a lot of credit to him. Also in the news tonight, the Scud missile that got fired via North Korea and landed in the Sea of Japan. It'll be interesting to see what the response is globally to that communist nation.
We are facing a existential threat with them.
Well, you know, the former Obama administration just called it all saber rattling. I've never actually seen a saber.
Well,
I should get out more.
They're completely wrong.
There you go.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while,
We've
Doug.
missed you, Harris.
Great to have you here. Evan, good to see you.
Great to see you.